Speaking from the Margins, Turning Straw into Spun Gold by Blake Harriman. Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn was about life 40 to 50 years before its publication. 40 to 50 years ago, literary voices that had been on the margins began to be heard. In The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, Twain gave voice to Jim, a slave who was on the margins of society. Twain makes it clear that Jim's voice was always present. It is who is finally listening to Jim's voice, a white boy, that brings Jim in from the margins. Women authors have, like Jim, always been speaking, but their voices have not been heard by the mainstream. The events of the last 40 to 50 years, including the women's liberation movement, have brought women's voices up to the main stage where they can be heard. Similarly, many minority authors were on the margins. The civil rights movement helped bring these voices towards the center of our cultural life. We are going to discuss 3 authors who were both women and minorities and examine what they went through to have their voices heard. Sandra Cisneros has tried to give voice to the voiceless, representing the lives of Chicanas, working-class Mexican-American women. She portrays women grappling with racism, cultural issues, in a male-dominated culture. Cisneros was born in Chicago in 1954, the daughter of a Chicana mother and a Mexican-American father. When she was little, her family moved from one Chicago apartment to another. She was not a bright student, but even then she had a hunger for writing. Cisneros grew up in 2 worlds, her world in Chicago and her world in Mexico. She spent so much time at her grandma's house in Mexico City that she thought it was home. She felt lucky to have a close relationship with Mexico and a bicultural experience. Cisneros had a quiet war with the patriarchal nature of her Mexican heritage. She grew up with 6 brothers and was not supposed to leave the house before they did, and not before she got married. She broke a taboo by leaving home before her brothers and as a single woman. Cisneros had a strong, intelligent mother. She would not have become a writer if her mother had been a more traditional woman. She read plenty of library books. She also listened to her father's stories and has used many of them in her books. Cisneros' books portray Chicana women who struggle to make something beautiful out of ugliness. She has opened doors for other Latina writers by her celebratory treatment of women grappling with racism, cultural issues, and patriarchy. Amy Tan has written about the immigrant mothers of Chinese American women, giving voice to their broken speech and oral storytelling. She writes about the universal exploration of the mother-daughter relationship through the marginalized Chinese American experience. Tan was born in 1952 in Oakland, California, to Chinese immigrant parents. Like Cisneros, Tan's family moved nearly once a year, from one mixed neighborhood in Oakland to another. Her father, an electrical engineer, died when Tan was 15. Tan was greatly influenced by her mother. Tan considers the broken English spoken by her mother to be the mother tongue, a language of intimacy. She believes this language may have limited her, causing her to get poorer scores on standardized English tests than on math tests. Tan's most famous work, The Joy Luck Club, embraced her mother's broken English and also her mother's secret past in China, where she had 3 daughters and a mother who had killed herself. The broken English that had limited Tan became her greatest strength as a storyteller. Rita Dove's writing brings the marginalized into the mainstream by showing that race or blackness need not be one central subject, but does not need to be omitted either. She writes about people who may be black rather than white about black people. Dove was born in Akron, Ohio in 1952, and she grew up during the American Civil Rights Movement. She loved books and read everything in the house, even learning German so she could read her father's German reference books. Although Dove loved books, for a long time the possibility of being a writer was beyond her imagination. She had no role models for her as a writer. Real writers were long-dead white males, usually with beards. At the age of 9 or 10, Dove began writing comic books with female superheroines. She wrote her first novel in 3rd or 4th grade. She eventually became a Pulitzer Prize-winning author and in 1992 was named Poet Laureate of the United States. Dove has published 9 volumes of poetry, a book of short stories, a collection of essays, and a novel. Her work portrays people as people, not as simply black or white or as victims, and she writes about everything that interests her or that has influenced her in her life. As Twain brought in the marginalized voice of Jim into the mainstream, Cisneros, Tan, and Dove have brought the marginalized voices of Chicanas, Chinese immigrants, and African Americans into the mainstream by showing that their individual experiences reflect universal truths.